So hello everyone, thank you for tuning in again. As you can see, it hopefully looks a little bit better. I'm recording on one of my cameras instead of my laptop, so hopefully the image is crisper. Did a little bit of lighting. Have a light up here for myself and then one in the background to give that little orange glow, so hopefully it looks pretty decent for now. I'm going to keep changing and testing stuff out so it looks better and better. But you guys requested to see to listen to, rather, to kind of hear about the symbolism of the new film that came out by Robert Eggers called Nosferatu. Now, this obviously isn't necessarily an original version of this. There was Nosferatu released in, I believe, 1922, and another one sometime later, so this is kind of like the third iteration of it. And I honestly think Robert Eggers is one of the best directors out there right now, and he's really close to reaching to that kind of like medieval storytelling mind, but he just slightly misses the mark because his outlook is still very, very pagan. And so the film opens up. Actually, before I get into this, spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie and rather not hear about it, please, skip this video and watch it after you've seen the movie. But, I'm going to kind of cover the story in this and might give away details that are, reveal kind of the plot of the film and things like that. So, this is for yourself, spoiler alert. Turn it off now if you plan on watching the movie. But if you've already seen it or don't care, the movie starts off with our main character reaching out to the shadows, right? So she makes a pact with Nosferatu. So it starts off at night. You see this dark, shadowy figure kind of reaching out to her. And it's revealed later on in the movie that she kind of made a pact, or almost you can say a vow, like a marriage vow, to this darkness that exists, later revealed to be Nosferatu. The story goes on. You show that she's married with her husband, and her husband has to leave he's trying to make money for the family and things like that. And the movie kind of starts in this manner. Eventually, towards the end, we see that Nosferatu basically comes back to her, and they get, there's this kind of like dark wedding that happens, and they share flesh, and the sun comes out and Nosferatu dies, but she does in the matter also. And so in general, if you want to understand the meaning of this movie, you don't even have to look at, watch the whole thing. You just look at the beginning and the end for the most part. And the stuff in the middle kind of helps us understand this pattern a little bit more. But what's interesting is it's a kind of a revelation of, I would say, kind of like this a feminine cycle, like we've been talking about a lot lately. And so the best way to, I guess, understand it is looking into the movie deeper itself. So you have a very materialistic world. I believe it takes place in either the mid or late 1800s, and it's in the midst of the Industrial Revolution. And later on, it's revealed with one of the doctors that he makes some kind of comment saying that his limits are reached, right? Like everything physical that he's tried is not working to help heal this woman. It's up to more of a spiritual matter, which is later when Osborn's character gets revealed that this occultist scientist, right? So we're living in this world that basically has rejected God. You can almost view the main character, the woman, as a kind of microcosm of the world itself in this film, right? So you have this industrial, very materialistic world, and she, to a certain extent, has made a pact with death. So it's kind of like these two areas that are very similar with each other. Now, what's also interesting is that, like I mentioned, when the husband goes out to the castle and in order to make this bargain or this deal, he signs in an aspect his soul away in order for him to be able to, sell this property or whatever it was. Now, this is something of a pattern. If you look at the couple, looks to me as something like Adam and Eve, because she makes a pact with death first, in the same way Eve ate of the apple. and then he kind of agrees to it and signs it away, right? Like, he doesn't say anything. The whole time in the film, even before he left for this, she's begging him not to leave because the darkness is returning, and he leaves anyway, right? So he kind of like ignores her and signs away the paperwork and makes the deal official. And so we see that also with Adam and Eve in terms of like she's communing with the snake, and Adam refuses to listen to her and just kind of sits back and does the same thing, right? So you have this fall of man kind of pattern in here, right? And then going once again towards the end of the movie, a lot of people say like, oh, this is nonsense that she had to like buy time in order for the sun to come out. But that's actually not the point of that scene at all. She wasn't necessarily buying time. It's showcasing the fulfillment of that cycle of the world that she's in, right? So like, if you look at almost Germany as her, like she's Germany, due to the materialistic society and darkness and the individualism of it, the only way to get out of it is to sleep, we could say to a certain extent, with death. Like that's the one way out within their framework. And so it's kind of showcasing this pattern. But what's interesting also on top of this is that when the sun comes out and kills Nosferatu, within the movie, it happens during Christmas time, right? And like, with my previous videos, I did the one about Saint Lucia. I did one about Saint Morrigan, the mermaid saint, recently, that kind of replicate this of the future coming light, which is interesting because it shows like a sense of hope that actually, though she's stuck in this pattern due to the way her world is, Christ is still coming, right? Like there's still opportunity. You can say the one that will defeat death is coming. And so that's showcased in the film through the rising sun and, killing death. Nosferatu is, basically death. He's the demon of death. Throughout the film, you see he brings disease, he has to eat people and things like that. I made a short video on my Instagram about the symbolism of vampires, but I also kind of talked about it in my video of the symbolism of eating. It's just trying to consume. He's trying to kind of like consume the world and take everything into himself, which what death does, it just swallows and eats. So he, through which also introduces this aspect of kind of like the mystery of the Virgin Woman, once again with this pattern of Saint Lucia and stuff like that, of the beginning of the coming of the new day. She sacrifices herself in an aspect for the coming light, but at the same time there's this other aspect where she didn't make a vow to the light or the goodness, you can say. It's to the darkness, but even so, there's an aspect to the feminine show, kind of like being the warning, almost like the canary in the coal mine of like showcasing us what is wrong with society, but at the same time able to bring out a new dawn into the world, with the Virgin Mary bringing out Christ into it, which is kind of what this pattern within the movie is showcasing us. Now, the other thing that's interesting that feeds into this whole thing of rejection of Christianity and stuff like that is, and it's pretty fitting, is that after the husband gets bit by Nosferatu, I believe for like the second or third time, and manages to escape, he finds himself in a Romanian Orthodox church, and they tell him to stay. And it's almost like another opportunity of God calling out and saying, like similar to the story in Genesis of where are you? And he denies it again and runs out, right? And so he leaves that, and this is all feeding into this whole pattern of the meaning of materialism, how it reaches its limits, and how the only thing that comes about from it is death, right? So like materialism, the Industrial Revolution, kind of like snuffed out light from the world and brought in this like new, more mechanistic like culture that just seeks death. The second, I guess you can say, kind of problem that prevents it from being like a fully Christian story and leaves, I think, some people, especially faithful people, kind of uneasy, is the fact that they seek help from an occultist, which is, I think it also showcases the missed point and the complete understanding of the spiritual world through Robert Eggers himself, is that, they do not reach out to a priest or go back to the Romanian church. They reach out to an occultist, almost like the only way to defeat this is through knowledge, right? So part of what makes the occult is the secrecy of it, and it's you can say it's a pursuit of power through different aspects, whether that be knowledge, usually portrayed through magic. So he's a scientist, and he's just seeking knowledge, and in some aspect he understands the pattern, but he also fails to save the woman. So, if you were to reframe this more from a Christian perspective, you would probably have maybe the husband, the man, ending up slaying the dragon, being Nosferatu, and saving his bride, right, his princess, which doesn't happen. If you're interested in kind of understanding this pattern a little bit more, Jonathan Pajot, in his comic book God's Dog, in the first one, another, spoiler alert, but he draws back kind of to this by showcasing that when Saint George saves the princess from a dragon or from a monster, there's this mystery behind that. Those two identities, and that when the man or the prince or the king saves the queen or the princess, the kind of the virgin, the woman, owes her life to him, right? So that's why usually it kind of like ends in a marriage, or kind of like in a marriage itself, because the woman's cycle leads to a death, and that death is either through being bound in marriage, through being bound to, you can say, like culture, society itself, which is kind of what feminism does. If that would be the monster, the dragon eating the virgin, or Nosferatu swallowing the woman, and then it kind of leads to a death. Or so it's either like have a child and die to a family, you can say, like sacrifice yourself to a family, or you get eaten by a monster, right? And so in Pajot's book, he has that, Saint George saves her, but he couldn't marry her, like he couldn't take her. So she runs out into the wilderness, right? And so she, in a sense, dies anyway. And it's sad, but it's kind of like the understanding of this pattern of the woman being associated with the cycle of life and death, right? And so that's also what is kind of shown through this film. And as a matter of fact, if you look at, to one of my points earlier, Robert Eggers himself, in an interview with Osborne, the one that played the occultist, says that she binds herself to death because the society is, so individualistic and so lonely that that's the only place she can go to find, you can say, something like companionship or something close to a marriage. If he did know like the full scope of the meaning of this pattern, but at the end of the day, that's kind of what it leads to. And so even he himself, as he participating with the story, making the story, ended up in this manner. Essentially, it's the cycle kind of a woman, but also the roles of the two genders. It's almost like a mini Genesis story going into Christmas, and but not necessarily fully. And it's a little bit odd to understand. So hopefully what I've been kind of saying makes sense and is not me just kind of rambling. But I did find this movie highly interesting. I find Robert Eggers really close to the type of storytelling that I really enjoy, to this almost like medievalish mindset. And the only thing is that, obviously we want stories that showcase us these patterns from a place of goodness for the seeking of truth and beauty. And I still think he's kind of in this paganistic mindset, and you see this with his other films like The Northman as well, which I won't get into now, but there's a similar pattern where it's a very pagan story. And so I would be interested to hear what you guys think. Leave your comments below. I usually try to respond. I don't have many subscribers or followers at the moment, so it's easy for me to respond to most of the comments. And if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to the video, the notification bells and all that kind of stuff, and share it with friends or family if you enjoyed it. But once again, hopefully it makes sense, and let me know your thoughts. So until the next video, thank you very much for listening.